From the foundational solutions such as collars with identification tags or secure yards to microchipping and emergency kits, there have there are proven solutions to help pets remain safe at home. To prepare for everyone for July, Lost Pet Prevention Month, this we're going to discuss the importance of lost pet prevention and how animal welfare organizations can arm themselves with community resources. Lorien Clemens, co-founder and CEO of PetHub, and Jerrica Owens, who is the executive director of the National Animal Care and Control Association, will share their expertise, some of their new data and methodologies that are easy to access and implement. So with that, Jerrica and Lorene will take us through a presentation and we'll have a Q&A at the end. And so with that, I will be in the chat if you need me. And the floor is yours, ladies.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lorien Clemens. I am the CEO and co-founder of PetHub, as Vincent mentioned. Really, really excited to be here. Jerrica, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jerrica Owen. I am the Executive Director of the National Animal Care and Control Association. Also thrilled to be here with you all tonight.
Yeah, so Jerrica and I were talking, I don't know, a couple years ago, before 2022, about how here at PetHub, we get a lot of lost pets coming through our system in different ways. We get a lot of questions coming in to our call center and to our support team and our care team and about lost pets, lost pet prevention, and all these kind of things, particularly when a pet is actually lost. And Jerrica and I were having a conversation and she was sharing some stuff with me too. And I don't feel like we're on the same page here, like from an animal welfare perspective and what pet parents are actually like asking us about and what they seem to know and frankly don't know. And so we decided that we were going to put these together and look at this and say like, hey, are there some gaps here that what is happening in the shelter and what is happening in the quote unquote real world with pet parents, and do a survey. So we did a joint survey, and we started doing it in early early summer of 2022. And we're going to take you through what we found. It's been really great because it's been able to help us really dig deep into the understanding of the complexities of those lost pet incidents, pave a way for a compassionate and effective approach for reuniting pets with their people. And so just a couple things that we want to cover in terms of, and normally we spend a lot more time than this on talking about the methodology and stuff, but we're going to keep it super close, super fast here. The survey itself, we had 4,000 pet owners. Over 4,000 pet owners took the survey and over 3,000 animal welfare professionals took the survey. About 50% of those pet parents came from distribution channels that were put out by PetHub. So there's definitely some bias there, we understand. Also, another bias that's inherent in this is going to be the fact that we only did this online. We didn't do a paper version. We didn't do a phone version or anything like that. So everybody that did respond is digitally connected in some way. When we are talking about the different participants, we're going to talk about pet parents or dog parents. We're frankly going to focus mostly on the dogs. We'll talk a little bit about the cats. Some of you may think of them as pet owners, but for the sake of this, because PetHub refers to them as pet parents, we're going to call them pet parents. And then for animal welfare professionals, it will either be an AWP or AWO shorthand there for that. Did I miss anything, Jerrica?
I don't think so. I mean, simply put, we wanted to just compare the strategies of pet owners against animal welfare professionals when it comes to the perceptions of lost pet prevention and reunification. So like Lorien said, we just had this conversation and my perspective was the shelters and hers was the pet parents. And that's what sort of launched all of this. And I'm super excited to take you through this today.
Yeah, we found out some really cool stuff. And as Vincent mentioned, part of all of this is giving you the resources to actually put it into action. So let's dig in. We thought it would be fun, rather than just giving you a bunch of data, to actually tell some stories about 4 unique lost dogs and their outcomes. And just so you know, these are based on real stories that we hear from pet parents here at PetHub. Some of them are actually personal stories that we have here. And all of them are going to cover kind of the big, broad questions that we asked in some way. So we asked the pet parents, first we said, did you lose a pet or not? Over 25% had lost a pet within the last 5 years. Many more had lost a pet over their lifetimes, but in the last 5 years, over 25% had lost them. And so we say, okay, how did they get lost? Did they make it home? How long did it take before they got them home? How did you search for them? And what methods or method was the most effective to finally get them home? So we're going to talk about these four doggos. So first we have Sam. And Sam is going to represent those doggos that got home in 24 hours or less. Actually, Sam and Poppy are both going to do that. With Sam, we're going to focus on what we discovered were the most effective methods for the amount of time that they were lost, according to what pet parents actually have experienced. And then we're also going to talk just in generally overall what those methods were and how fast they were compared to other methods. For Poppy, we're going to talk about the most common reasons that dogs got lost in the first place. It was really fascinating there. And then also what that means in terms of lost pet prevention opportunities that we as a community have. The second most common time for recovery was 48 hours, more than 40 hours, but less than a week. And so for that, we're going to talk about Mingus. And with Mingus, we're going to talk specifically about how pet parents had interactions with animal welfare organizations and what those went, and the effectiveness of those interactions. And we're also going to look at, from the AWO side, the return to home problems, staff involvement, staff understanding about their involvement, and then the education that goes around that. And then finally, thankfully, our least common scenario that we saw from the survey were doggos that never made it home. The majority did make it home, which is great, but there were definitely those that never made it home. So with Roxy, we're going to look at those methods that pet parents said were least effective. And then we're also going to compare what pet parents experience as effective and compare it directly to animal welfare perceptions of what they think is effective and what shelter websites are telling people they should be doing. And then look overall at those methods that pet parents overwhelmingly used, but did not get their pet home. So with all that, we're going to move straight into Sam. All right, so just say all these stories are based on real life stories. Sam is actually based on one of our employees' dogs. So the picture is real. The name has been changed to save Sam's, protect his identity. But Sam is a stud dog. He had been newly rehomed. His mama had brought him home just a couple of days before. And she was also in a brand new living space that she had only lived in for about 2 weeks before she got Sam. And so new town that she wasn't familiar with and new home that she wasn't familiar with. And she was not aware that the big, lovely screen door that Sam loved to sleep in front of, because there was a nice sunspot there, the latch would not properly latch. So she did not know that that was a faulty place for an easy exit for a doggo. So Sam, who had a neuter appointment scheduled in the future, was still, he was looking for girlfriends actively, and he smelled something apparently through that screen door, pushed the door open, and went looking for a girlfriend in the neighborhood. Now, luckily, Sam got home in less than 3 hours. So we're going to talk here about what was effective for getting those pets home. And when we were doing our survey, we asked them 3 separate questions. What did you do first? What did you do second? What did you do third to look for your pets? So we really understand what were the first things that people did. And then we asked them, were there other methods that you did in the first 24 hours? And then we asked them what method or methods ultimately got the pet home, and then how long they were lost. And then we took all of that data and we cross-analyzed all of it. And so for Sam, his mom and many, many others that got their pet home very quickly started the search physically immediately. She ran out the door and started combing the neighborhood immediately for him. While she was searching, she hadn't been searching that long, actually. She didn't. She doesn't know exactly how long he was lost, but she knows it was less than 3 hours. She got a call from PetHub that Sam had been found, and he was just a few houses away with his new girlfriend. In Sam's case, he had zero impact on local animal welfare, which is what we want. We don't want there to be any impact for lost pets on animal welfare organizations. We want those suckers to get home fast and without any kind of extra stress and without costing a lot of money to the animal welfare organization. So one of the things that we did, and this is one of the many resources that you will be provided at the end, we created a chart and then a couple of social media series that go along with this chart as well that analyzed what was effective and when based on how long they were lost. So one of the things I want to point out here, and Jerrica's going to dig a little bit deeper into this, when we look at the first 24 hours, by far, the most important thing to do was to physically search for the pet. And the most pets got home fast by physically searching. In fact, that was true for everything 3 days and under. The next most effective thing was social media and posting it on. Mostly people mentioned Facebook, but putting it out on social media. And then the number third was ID tags. But here's an interesting thing. When we broke out ID tags and we said, okay, was it a traditional, what we affectionately call here at PetHub, a dumb tag that has a static piece of information, perhaps a person's name and phone number, or perhaps it's a pet license that goes back to the shelter or that kind of thing, versus a digital identification, which is either like a QR code or something else that can be scanned, like an NFC tag or even just a URL that links to a profile that has multiple points of contact listed on that. Those were much more effective. In fact, those digital ID tags were the second fastest way that pets got home. And then, of course, neighborhood apps like Nextdoor and Ring's neighbors, and then looking at the local shelter or contacting the local shelter. Those are the most effective things in 24 hours. I'm going to send you over here, though, so this is an interesting thing. It was not until the pet was gone for a month that microchips entered into the top 5. And we think that that's significant because, in fact, in the first 3 days and even in the first week, they were in the lower half of the effectiveness of getting that pet home. But certainly once they've been gone for a long time, that was when they were much more effective. So what about cats? Here's the deal with the cats. The information that we got on cats, far fewer people owned cats that took the survey than did dogs. The vast majority owned dogs or dogs and cats. Cats, because they're just literally a different species, the way that they were getting lost and the way that they were getting home were much different. ID tags are much lower use on cats than they are on dogs, for one thing. So for them, that social media and physical search and neighborhood apps, those are much higher. And ID tags, frankly, weren't in that top 10 there. But it was the same for microchips. They didn't become super effective until they were gone for much later. Jerrica?
All right, thank you. So what we just heard was that the pet owners knew how their dogs got home, right? They did the physical searching, they utilized the social media and the digital ID tags. So now when we ask the animal welfare professionals, how do you think pets get home? This is where we found the gap. And again, remember the premise of this research and survey was that we wanted to see the gaps. We wanted to compare the strategies to what we're doing in the shelter to what the pet parents and the pet owners out in the communities are doing. To effectively address a situation, we really need to understand the situation. So like we saw, visible ID tags versus invisible. Lorien mentioned microchips. So microchips are great, and we are not going to tell you not to use them. But microchips are invisible versus the visible collar and tag. So we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit in a few more slides. Pet owners realize the value of the microchips, of course, but animal welfare professionals ranked it much while pet owners realize the value of this, while we ranked it much lower. The other thing is our focus as animal welfare professionals is after, right? As soon as the animals hit our doors, they may not, we may not think about this until they actually get in, and we get it. We're busy, the animals are always coming in. But what if we put some resources up front instead of waiting until they actually get to us? And then owner education. There's so many things out there, different phone apps, who to call, where to go. The pet owners may not fully understand all of the things that are available to them. So we'll jump into opportunities in a minute, but on the next slide, you'll see I took just a couple of screenshots. These are from my area, and it was interestingly, not a single one of them had a collar and tag. So thankfully, most of them in the comments of the social media posts indicate that they got reunited, but probably because of the social media, and I live in a really tiny community, but maybe if this was in a larger area, they may not have made it home. So just really interesting that they were all completely naked. Let's meet Poppy.
Yeah, and we're going to preach no naked pets throughout the presentation. Okay, so Poppy gives us a really great opportunity to talk about just how dogs are getting lost. And it should be noted that Poppy's parents did so many things right. They crated her while she was away. She had a collar and ID on whenever she had outdoor access. She had a fully fenced and gated yard, and still she went AWOL, absolutely on a leash. And in her case, it was a gate that was left open to allow her to escape and finally chase her nemesis, a squirrel or whatever it was that Poppy was exploring that day. And we do see this quite a lot where people left the gate open that aren't part of the family, but nonetheless, it can be a big danger for your pet. So with Poppy, it did take her just a day to get home, but it did take a little bit more work. For her, social media was a big part of getting her home, as well as neighborhood apps. I believe in the case of Poppy, like I said, this is a real doggo, a different picture used, but a real doggo. It was the Nextdoor apps that helped her get home. And the pet parents also did file a missing pet report with the shelter, but that was the only impact on the local animal welfare organization. Ultimately, what got Poppy home was that somebody had seen a Facebook post earlier in the day. And then when she was out running an errand, she saw a dog that looked like Poppy sniffing along the sidewalk. She got pulled over and used the tag to reach her owner. Now, here's the thing. Both Sam and Poppy's lost pet stories could have been completely prevented. And we look at the data about why pets are getting lost. It's really clear that the most of the scenarios where the dogs were getting lost could be prevented. And usually just better pet education is what's missing here. So we asked pet parents and animal welfare professionals, we asked them, how did the dogs get lost? It's important to know that for the most part, the pet parents know why the dog got lost. Animal welfare professionals, not so much. They're kind of guessing. And what we found was that 60% of the dogs that were lost were three things. They got out of the back door, out of the backyard. They ran out of a door from the house, or they wandered off the property. And we allowed people to, expand and text below and tell us, more about it. And at times it was things like they might have had an electronic collar that failed. That might have been that they, the dog was out on the porch with the whole family. It's not a fenced yard, but then they turned around and the dog was gone, that kind of thing. Some other fairly significant reasons that didn't make it over, that made it over 10%, but didn't make it up into that majority group were failure of recall and leash control, getting out of a window, and wild animal encounters. And then least common were car accidents and things like that. And a very small percentage didn't have any idea how it had happened. Now, you might ask about, well, what about the cats? So here with the cats, that's where we're kind of really to have another big change here, because the same top three reasons were there, but it was only 40%, and windows hopped up into that group, and they were also statistically very significant for getting out of windows, which, frankly makes sense. Now, animal welfare professionals were all over the place. There was no one reason that was more common than another. And there was statistically no difference in what animal welfare professionals thought was the reason that pets got lost. Jerrica?
Yep. So, as Lorien just mentioned, when we asked the owners, right, they knew exactly those three reasons. They got out of the backyard, they ran out the door, and they wandered off. When we asked the animal welfare professionals those same questions, there was no consensus whatsoever. There was very little percentage change between all of the reasons. The question that we asked was a check all that apply. And again, there was very little consensus on any of the reasons. So that may indicate that animal welfare professionals who answered the survey were kind of guessing, right? We think these are the reasons. And so we get it. Again, our kennels are super full. Who can think about data when our kennels are full and they need to be cleaned? But this does provide us an opportunity as we move towards, looking at what are the reasons and what can we do. So just another gap that we saw and actually leads us to a lot of opportunities.
Okay, so let's talk about, your examples from the field, sorry.
One more. So we talked, so I did a bit of a deep dive on social media because I wanted to see what people were saying, right? What agencies are posting about lost pet prevention. And I found some really amazing examples. And so these are some things that I just wanted to share with you all. So you can see there's agencies here that are posting, put a collar and tag, make sure that your gate is securely latched. Here are some things you can do. It's not all, putting all of our eggs in the basket of microchipping, or it's not all of our eggs in the basket of other methods and things that we don't know if they're going to work or not. So by utilizing these, your social media posts or your communication, by sharing all of the different things, but definitely not forgetting to say things like collar and tag, fix your fence, that kind of stuff. So these were all really great examples.
Now we're going to talk about Mingus. This story is actually about my parents' dog. I don't have a good picture of my parents' dog, or I would have used it. But he actually passed away about 10 years ago, and back then we just didn't have very high resolution things. So Mingus was actually a big inspiration for PetHub and how we were doing things. He had free access to the outdoors all the time, chain link fence, which frankly is not the best for doggos. We actually have a shareable infographic about different fence types and how they are for lost pet prevention. He was a secret digger and a big time ball lover. If there was a ball being thrown anywhere, he wanted to chase it. And so Mingus saw the back of his extended backyard as the soccer fields that were on the other side of the chain link fence. And little did my mother and father know that he had been digging underneath the bushes that lined that back fence and had been creating an exit for himself. They don't know if he used it multiple times or if he just used it the one time, but Mingus got out through dug a hole, and he got out through that back of that fence. Mingus is kind of a scary story too, because it took 7 days for Mingus to get home. And Mingus had a dumb tag on. It was a super old tag. It was really hard to read. He became lost just before the first PetHub tag was produced. But thankfully, he did have a microchip, and that did come into play. So for my mom and dad, they reached out to a ton of local regional shelters, and they finally found him there, but it was because of his microchip. And here's the thing. They had not updated that microchip in years. They had no idea that they even needed to. And I helped them after he got lost, I helped them to get it updated. And it took a lot of work to get it updated. Now, this is 10 years ago, but still, it took over 10 years ago, but it took a lot of work to get him updated. And the microchip was thankfully discovered after a week of being lost. And the shelter that he was found at was 30 miles away. My mom and dad had gone to the local shelters first and foremost, because there's a shelter that's 8 miles from their home, which is the correct shelter where he would have been taken, but he was never taken there. And there were 7 days that he was unaccounted for. So the question is, was he in other shelters where the microchip was not being properly scanned? Was he just having a great old time out in the wild? Not really sure, but it was a very scary time for my parents, and probably highly stressful for Mingus. like my parents, we found that 84% of people that lost a dog did contact their local animal welfare organization in some way. In my parents' case, they contacted many of them. I think there were about eight or nine that they contacted. So clearly, people are looking to their local animal welfare organizations to help when a pet is lost, but the help that they're getting is inconsistent. And this is what we're going to talk about a little bit. Jerrica's going to talk about a little bit. um, a, More than half could not remember what information they were given. Now, granted, they're panicked, they're upset, and all these kind of things, but they can't remember if they were given any counseling on how to find their pet. And about 20% said, no, they didn't tell me anything about how to find my pet. And then just over a third said, yeah, they did give me some advice on how to find my pet. But you would hope that everybody that called in would be getting some advice on how to find that pet according to whatever the local resources and the local success rates were with different things. And so these are the things that the organizations did for the pet owner. So over 25%, this is just the 25% that recalled exactly what help was given, that these guys answered this follow-up question. Missing pet report was the number one thing that they did, and then checking for the shelter to see if the pet was there. Those are the most common. But less than a third were given education things that they could do beyond that. And just so, because this question came up a lot, we wanted to say, like, okay, the people that took the animal welfare survey, we wanted to know, like, what are you experts in terms of the return to home stuff that you're doing, or do you do something else at the shelter that really doesn't have anything to do with return to home? And what we found was that the vast majority of people spend at least 3 hours a week doing some kind of return to home thing, but the majority, over 50%, do at least 10 hours or more of return to home stuff. And why this is important is the next slide. You're going to see that even though the majority, well over 50%, do 10 hours or more of return to home work at their shelter, we asked animal welfare professionals, what things does your organization do for reunification efforts? And this was a check all that apply. And one of the things that you should notice is that nothing is higher than 26%. So, which was shocking to Jerrica and I, because at the very least, we would have expected to see 50, 70, 80% doing microchips, because that is such a prevalent thing in the industry. So we're not exactly sure what was happening there, but it could be that perhaps even though they were doing return to home efforts, they didn't necessarily know all the efforts they were doing. So they only knew the return to home efforts that were in their lane, as it were. And the interesting thing too for us was how low some of the most impactful things could do, low-hanging fruit, such as social media posting, how low that was done by these organizations. So Jerrica is going to talk about that gap a little bit more.
So just as we mentioned, the gap being that there's no consensus or majority use on any of the methods for the return to home activities. So despite most of the shelters intaking lost pets, the staff indicating that they were not aware of all of the things that their organization is doing to help, return the pets. And again, I get it. We're all very busy in an organization. My previous organization with over 500 employees, oftentimes the right hand doesn't always know what the left hand is doing. But again, we saw this as a gap. And so right from the study, it tells us that 75% of shelters either don't microchip, which again, we couldn't believe, or of the staff who are answering the survey don't know if they microchip. Same thing with the shelter software. It was the same sort of numbers. And so again, just a very interesting gap. Our industry has traditionally put a lot of emphasis on the microchips and the return to home for the microchips. But again, 75% of the people in the animal welfare answering our survey either don't know or said no. The other thing is that it also may tell us that the pet owners may not fully understand all of the different tools and technologies and resources that are available to them. And finally, the gap in return to home efforts made by organizations or understanding by all staff is what we offer, right? And what different programs and services are out there. So again, a gap, lots of opportunity here. The next slide shows a couple of additional examples from the field. So when you're out in the community, right, when you're doing adoptions, when you're out doing the field services or leadership is out talking to other leadership, are there things that everyone is saying? Are there consistencies in the messaging that's going out, no matter if you're talking to your city council or if you are talking to the pet owners at a vaccine clinic? So making sure that everyone has, right, the same script, the same return to home, return to owner, all of the different tools that are available that everybody has. So there's some clear and consistent messaging. I believe it's time to meet Roxy.
Roxy, yes. Okay, so Roxy is our sad story. And thankfully it's not terribly common, but it does happen. And we hear these stories a lot of times when people are coming to PetHub, it's because their previous dog was a Roxy when they didn't get home, and they're trying to prevent that from happening again. So Roxy, by the way, Roxy's kind of amalgamation of a lot of stories, and we made up a happy ending for Roxy just because we really couldn't stomach not having a happy ending for Roxy. But she did make it home eventually, but not to her original home. She was rehomed, adopted after having been in the shelter for more than a month. And Roxy's family loved her because, frankly, if we can't assume that people don't love their dog, and that's why they're not protecting their dog optimally. There's so many other reasons why it's not happening. But here's the thing. They relaxed about having her wear a collar ID because, she doesn't like, quote, she doesn't like the collar. In fact, she was naked when she went missing. They didn't have a fenced yard. She was allowed to roam freely, but, quote, she had never gone off before. She'd always stayed close before. So she was left unattended outside because they had the false sense of security that Roxy's never run off. She would never run off. She can't stand to be away from us. So in addition to that, the fact that she'd never run away before to give them a false sense of security, they also had a false sense of security because she had a microchip. And they were like, oh, the microchip will get her home. And they relied on that sole return to home method to get her home. Unfortunately, that microchip was out of date. It was not properly scanned. It migrated. Who knows? Who knows what didn't work properly with that microchip, but it didn't get her home. So Roxy was adopted 42 days after getting lost. And here is when we're looking at the things that pet parents do that are not effective according to our survey. So immediately, Roxy's family put posters all over the neighborhood. They took out an ad in the newspaper. They hired a pet detective. They called the local police. And Roxy had a very, very high impact to the local animal welfare. So like I mentioned, we're going to talk about what pet parents do that is not effective and what is done that was effective. So we're going to look first at these are the methods that were done by pet parents who found their dog. Their dog got home. You'll notice it starts with dark green and it ends at a very dark, dark, dark red. But we only included the top 15. There were 21 methods total. It was a check all apply type of a thing. So the top 15 are listed there. This is what animal welfare professionals think is the fastest. Remember, the most effective is, according to pet parents, was the green, and the slowest was the red. Here is what shelter websites say you should do to get your lost pet home. And here is what the dog owners who did not find their pets did to get their lost pets home. You'll notice that the red and the darker red is creeping up much more in these three here than it is in the others. So let's break down what these things actually are so you kind of know what they are. So number one, as we mentioned before, was physical search, followed by digital ID tags, and so on and so forth down the road. The microchips are right here, and that's that pale yellow. Overall, microchips were more effective the longer the pet was lost, but this is how fast the pets got home. So that's why this is stack ranked like this. These methods right here at the top, these were the methods that were most effective in getting the lost pet home in 24 hours or less. Now, here's where animal welfare professionals believe that we have the most effective getting a lost pet home fast. They believe that the microchip is going to be the most effective way to get the lost pet home. As Jerrica mentioned, you're coming from a perspective of what happens after they get to the shelter, and after they get to the shelter, the microchip is the most effective way. But from a pet parent's perspective, the second that dog gets lost, we have to look at that whole piece there. Jerrica's going to talk a little bit more about that. Interesting to note, though, that local veterinarians and paid lost pet alerts came into the top 15 with animal welfare professionals, and they did not make the top 15. In fact, they were almost at the bottom. Paid lost pet alerts, things like paw boost, when you're doing a paid paw boost and things like that, they were listed as the least effective. Not that they're not effective at all. Everything that made the list got at least a couple of pets home, but it means that it was, in terms of the full spectrum of the thousands of pets that had been lost that were part of this survey, it got the least amount got home. This is where things get, I think, a little bit worrisome. We looked at over 100 shelter websites. These included PetHub client websites, people that use PetHub as part of their identification program, and NACA members. And we quantified what lost pet / dog recovery advice was given and what order was it given in. And we did a weighted analysis of that, like, i.e., what should you do first? On average, on average, 6 pieces of unique advice were given on each website. 10% had only one thing, and it was most usually a link to the form for missing pets. There were several of the methods that we found from the pet parent's perspective were the least effective, were actually mentioned the most often. And here's where it gets really disturbing. Everything from physical search down, less than 50% of the shelter websites say anything about it under lost pets, meaning that less than 50% of the advice given on the shelter websites about what should you do if your pet is lost, less than 50% say go outside and look. Less than 50% say make sure your pet's a microchip is updated. Make sure your pet's digital ID tag is updated. And up here, and the number 3 thing that was listed, and it was like 80-something%, they put out a poster. And that was at the bottom of our effectiveness on our survey in terms of what pet parents found was effective. So finally, let's look at, these are what pet owners did that did not find their pets. These are what they were doing and relied on. The number 1 thing that they did was to visit the shelter or notify the shelter, which, interestingly enough, was the top 2 things that shelters told them people to do. Even though it's still in the green, so it's still something that's got pets home fairly fast, but not nearly as fast as other methods were. But you'll see a lot of red and dark orange starts to come into this one, because frankly, that's what the websites are telling them that they should be doing. If those are on the local websites, and that's what they're doing. Only 40% of the pets that were lost had a microchip that never got found. But interestingly enough, and this is something we would not have expected, 17% of them, when they got lost, 17% of them had no collar. The majority of them had a collar at least when they got lost. Of course, we don't know how long that collar stayed on. So we actually looked at the effectiveness of collar and visible IDs versus return to home time. 99.4% of dogs that were found in 24 hours had a visible ID tag when they were lost. And a good portion of them, about 1/3 of them, had a digital ID tag. The longer that they were lost, the less likely they were to be wearing a collar at the time of being lost. And when we overlay the microchips, this is where things weren't really clear cut as far as we were concerned data-wise, but we did find that the longer that they were lost, more of those pets did have microchips in the first place. And it was interesting that barely only 50% of the pets that were found in 24 hours or less had microchips. Now, you might be also, what about cats here? Again, cats in general did not wear did not wear ID tags nearly as much. But the good news is that cats had 44% of the cats had microchips versus just 43% of the dogs. So slightly more cats had microchips than dogs did. And then of those that were found in a day with the cats, 42% had collars and tags. That's just some interesting information there. Jerrica?
All right. So again, the gap, right? The gap is the value that we place on the invisible identification. And again, we're not telling you not to do the microchips, because absolutely it's a comprehensive approach when it comes to lost pet prevention. But are there things that we can be doing differently? So based on the expected outcomes from pet owners that did not find their dogs, it is believed generally that invisible identification is more important than visible, right? So there may be this emphasis that we as organizations and shelters do on the invisible, or maybe some other outdated things, when we can actually maybe alter what we do. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. And so one of the other things that we realize here is a gap, is the lack of collaboration within animal welfare. And it could be on things like sharing data, collaborative projects, standard platforms, things like that. So we do see a lot of opportunities here. So let's jump into, I think we're going into the opportunities. We're going to show you a couple of examples from the field. So Lorien mentioned that, there are things that animal welfare puts on our websites that may or may not be effective in our community. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of data. But I, again, did a deep dive, went into a bunch of websites, and these are just two examples that I found. But in neither of these examples did we tell the people to run around in their community, to post on social, to do anything other than to come to us and to call us. And so these, again, opportunities here for us to put things out on our website, and the communication that we share that might be really beneficial to help people, and to actually remove ourselves altogether, so the pets don't even have to come to us. So let's move into the opportunities now. So I alluded to this first one a little bit, which is the data. So animal welfare organizations can adjust our pet parent education and the counseling to more closely coincide with activities that are most effective during each return to home time period. So Lorien mentioned that less than 24 hours, that 24 to 48. There are things that we need to recognize that our perception may not actually be the reality. And so the opportunity here is, let's get out in the community and let's collect data when we do have the opportunity to really get a deeper understanding of what is going to work in our own communities. By knowing what strategies are going to work, again, by collecting data and by analyzing data, we can most appropriately match our pre and post communication to make sure that we're effectively reaching the owners in the time frames that it's going to be most helpful. So matching up, right? What does the data say? And then how can we most appropriately help our community? So we also know that it's not really a one size fits all, right? We saw that Sam, I think Sam was right from the big city, and what is going to work in the big city may not be most effective in a more rural area. It's really not a one size fits all approach, but without the data, that's okay, Lorien, you can leave it.
Okay, sorry, I realized I jumped ahead.
That's okay. That's okay. But without the data, I think it's important because then we can't really address those root causes in our backyards, right? So more rural area that maybe doesn't have fences, talking about fixing fences may not actually work in that area, but there might be something like invisible fences that may be, something that you can more appropriately match your education for your pet parents, right? At time of adoption or just on your website, things like that. So the opportunity here is to really shift focus and make it a more comprehensive approach. Let's talk about microchips and tags. Let's put, just as much emphasis on making sure that the pets leave our organizations and leave our facilities with a collar and a tag. And I'd actually love to kind of put it out there to, does anybody already, put collar and tag? Give me a thumbs up in the chat. If you do already, have every pet leave your facility with a collar and a tag, that would be amazing. Another opportunity for us here is to shift our mindsets from reactive to proactive, right? Again, getting out in front of everything, putting just as much education up front versus just in the adoption packets to go home. And then let's, shift from minimal to multiple. Again, those visible ID tags at time of adoption. Let's put a lot of different communication and emphasis on the comprehensive approach, all the different things. In a nutshell, let's shift from assumptions to reality, right? Let's get the data and let's find out. The next one. Yep.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So the next opportunities here that we saw was, we as animal welfare work so hard to keep pets out of our shelters. What if we shifted to having them get lost at all, right? Having them shifted. Sorry, I said the backwards. We put so much emphasis on getting them out of the shelters and getting them home. But what if we shifted our focus to keeping them from getting lost in the first place? Right, at all. So let's work on programs that focus on reunification efforts, such as, I know a lot of agencies and organizations are starting to do even positions dedicated to lost pet reunification. That's amazing. Let's focus more on programs that maybe have recall training, or looking for grants within our community to do more of the humane and visible fences, and again, targeting our owner communication and our education. All right, you can go to the next one. All right, we are running short on time here. I'm trying to go fast.
Oops, sorry. I'll talk about this one real quick. Well, hopefully we'll have enough time at the end. You guys are getting a sneak peek. In fact, you get early access to this. All of the infographics, the pictures, including the naked dog, no naked dogs, all of those are part of our templates that we have ready to go that you can use for yourself at your shelter. And I'll share that right at the end, because we're going to zoom through the rest of this. It's right at the end.
All right. Another opportunity is that, there's so much amazing technology out there. Let's put some emphasis on sharing some of these modern return to home efforts that are really proving to be effective. And how do we know they're effective? Because there's data, right? And so by not sort of going with the old school things that we've been telling people to do, let's use what's out there. Again, such amazing technology. The next slide shows I'm not too familiar if everyone's familiar with Petco Love Loss, but it's a facial recognition software. It can integrate right to your software, an amazing tool to get your pets reunited without having to come into the shelter at all. The next one is the photo on the my right, maybe your left, is the PetHub tag. So the PetHub is a digital ID tag. Anybody with a smartphone can scan the QR code. Again, amazing technology, updated technology, modern technology, things that are really going to help pets stay out of our shelters. The next one is the collaboration and visibility on the return to home programs and activities. So I know that we have a ton of amazing programs and organizations who are doing amazing things. Let's continue to get creative and try new things. I think we can all agree that intake is clearly not slowing down, definitely not this year. We hope. Feels like this year we kind of hit the gas a little bit. But I think if the pandemic and the space we're in now has really taught us anything, it's that really to question everything and to see how we can do things differently. And I think that the collaboration, making sure that everyone has the same information when they're out there dealing with the public, again, working together, making sure that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. There are Lorien, I think this was you.
Oh, yes. So this is one of the things that we recommend is having scripts for wait a minute, am I on this right place? Yeah, having scripts for your staff. Literally taking the time to write out the scripts, Xerox them. Oh gosh, I'm showing my age. Copy them off, laminate them, have them at every single desk so that every single person knows. This is an example of a script that we create for staff for staff that uses the PetHub ID tag. But then also, things like having in an adoption packet, things that are about lost pet prevention. So these are things, by the way, that are coming soon. They're not part of the templates yet, but they are going to be within a week. But they'll give you some opportunities to put that stuff into the adoption kit so that pet parents have it, that they can put up on their fridge at home, and so they know what to do ahead of time before their pet even gets lost.
All right, last one, we already talked about this. We talked about just making sure that you have data, gathering that community data to really make, informed decisions and informed and targeted programs. But again, it's that community data that's really important. You have to know, why the pets are going missing and what the best methods and strategies are to get them home versus just guessing and kind of doing what we've always done. So that's kind of what wraps up.
Yeah. If you scan this QR now, and by the way, you'll have access to this deck later, so don't worry, you can definitely scan it later. But that actually is the outline of the pet parent survey that we did that you can adapt and use for your own community. Okay, one thing that I'm going to do with like the 3 minutes we have left, and this actually answers Augusta's question about putting all this information into a complete resource. Yes, we have. So I'm going to make sure on my share. Sorry, it's taking a little bit more time. I'm going to move to my screen. Okay, so on our website, is everybody able to see that? Jerrica, is it showing? Good.
Yep.
So if you go to pethub.solutions/templates, you'll not only be able to click here, and it will take you to the deck that Jerrica and I just showed so that you can share it with other staff, get those QR codes that we flew through, that kind of thing. But also on the bottom of the page, you will find that there is a banner and a link. So the link will take you to it will be a view only, so you can't write on it, but it will be a view only of every single template that we have available for you to use. And there will be a link to those templates. Or you can look at the templates on our website, but you can go in here and you can see there's social media feed, there's infographics, there's social media stories, and there's printables. We're still working on the printables. We had hundreds of things that we were putting together. So the printables are the last thing, but you'll see then you'll be able to go and look specifically at all of the different resources that we have available for you. All of these resources, and I'll just show you one, for example. Let's do this one. This, for example, is a monthly. So there's one post per month that you can put on social media. It won't look like this for you when you get it. And I just don't have the time to show you what it's going to look like. See here, it says edit template and use template for new design. The edit template won't be on there. If by chance the edit template comes up for you, please don't try to edit the template. Just use the design for your own. You want to copy this. And there are directions on how to do that. But when you go in, you'll be able to see all of the different slides, and you can put your own logo in there. You can even change the colors. Sorry, this is a lot of bandwidth here. If you wanted to change the background color to whatever your shelter's background color is, you can do that. There's a place here where you can put in your own logo. And then these are ready for you to share. And we on the template spreadsheet, we give you times when you should share it, and if it has a corresponding infographic or a corresponding social media story or anything like that. So,
thank you all for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We know it's a whirlwind.